Why did you cut off the fuel? No, I did not. That haunting questions just before impact now sits at the center of growing controversy surrounding the Air India flight crash 171 in Ahmedabad. It's not just moments of confusion in the cockpit. It's the line that has ignited debate across aviation circles, triggered allegations of cover-up, and left grieving families demanding answers. So what really happened that day? Who should be held accountable? And does the preliminary report raise more questions than it answers? Let's unpack the entire picture. June 12, just 90 seconds after the takeoff from Ahmedabad, Air India Flight 171 crashed into a building near the airport. The Boeing Dreamliner was bound for London but never made it past its initial climb. All 260 people on board, including 229 passengers, 12 crew members, and 19 on the ground, were killed. Now here's where it gets strange. The Aircraft Investigation Bureau, or the AAIB, released its preliminary findings, and what the flight data revealed was shocking. Both engine fuel control switches were flipped from run to cutoff just 1 second apart. That move, for whatever reason, shut off fuel to both engines mid-air. Even more chilling, the cockpit voice recorder captured a pilot asking, "Why did you cut off the fuel?" The other replied, "I did not." So, let's talk about these fuel switches. They control fuel flow to the engines, pretty basic but essential. On Boeing 787, they sit just below the throttle lever and have a built-in locking mechanism to prevent accidental movement. But clearly, something went wrong. After the switches were moved to cut off, they were flipped back to run 14 seconds later. The aircraft tried to restart its engines through what's called an auto-relight sequence. But then the damage was done. The engines had lost thrust, the aircraft entered a nosedive and crashed despite a mayday call. Back in 2018, the US aviation regulator, the FAA, issued a safety alert about these very fuel switches locking mechanism. The FAA had urged airlines to inspect the switches, but, and this is the key, it was not mandatory. The AAIB report now says that Air India did not carry out those inspections. And why? Because the FAA advisory was a recommendation and not rule. Even Boeing, in its internal communication to airlines, pointed out that while the switch design is shared across various aircraft models, it still is not considered an unsafe condition. And that brings us to the response from India's pilot community. The Airline Pilots Association of India and Indian Commercial Pilots Association have strongly pushed back, saying the report seems to quietly blame the cockpit crew. In fact, the ICPA said the insinuation of pilot suicide that's been floating around is not only reckless but also deeply insensitive. They have called for a fair, fact-based investigation and says pilots should be included in inquiry and at least as observers. They are not alone. Back in Gujarat and across the UK, families of those who died say they don't trust what they are reading. Amin Siddiqui, who lost multiple family members, said flat out, "We don't accept this report." He has rejected the airline's compensation and says he will take Air India to the court. Tushar Joge, another relative, said he always feared the pilots would be blamed. He asked why aren't they looking into mechanical faults, how qualified are the investigators, and why was not the FAA advisory made mandatory. Even more heartbreaking, one man who lost his brother and the entire family told reporters, "How do we move on without knowing the truth?" Meanwhile, aviation experts have begun dissecting the report and some aren't impressed. Aviation analyst Sanjay Lazar said the report, in his words, raises more questions than it answers. He wondered why US media had early access to the findings before Indian media and the public. And about the partial cockpit audio release, Lazar said it just adds to the confusion and leaves a lot unsaid. Retired Air Marshal Crew Sanjeev Kapoor also weighed in. He believes the report leaves many doubts According to him, the deployment of the ram air turbine or RAT confirms both engines and electrical system failed, meaning something much more serious was happening than a simple mistake. Mark D. Martin, CEO of Martin Consulting, was blunt, calling the report cryptic and technically vague. He said, "There are points that don't add up, especially around how the engines shut down and what exactly happened during those 30 seconds in the air." Captain Umang Anjani from Indus University pointed out that when fuel is cut off, engine failure is inevitable, and that following the engine restart sequence under pressure is incredibly tough. Retired Captain Prashant Dhala explained that there is no single cause behind such crashes. It could be a mix of design flaws, procedure, crew experience, and external factors. He says, "Let's wait for the final report." Meanwhile, Union Minister Muralidhar Mohol also stepped in, asking the public to hold off on conclusions until the final report is out. Union Minister Muralidhar Mohol also stepped in, asking the public to hold off on conclusions until the final report is out. He reminded everyone that the AAIB is autonomous and the ministry does not interfere. What started with a question in the cockpit, "Why did you cut off the fuel?" has now spiraled into a storm of doubt, grief, anger, and unanswered questions. Was it a human error, a design flaw, a missed inspection, or something else entirely? The final report may eventually answer these questions, but until then, families want justice, pilots want fairness, and the public wants the truth. Because when 260 lives are lost in 90 seconds, speculation simply won't cut off.